Lately, I've been wanting to feel a little spooked, maybe even a little bit scared. But at the same time, I wanted to be in space. So I narrowed it down and had two choices of games that I've never played before. Alien Isolation or the Dead Space remake. Obviously, I chose the remake. I've actually never played the original Dead Space and know next to nothing about the story. So I think now is the perfect time to dive into it, especially with a remake being out for a little over a year now. Because if I'm being honest, I don't think I would have ever played without the remake due to the graphics being a bit too outdated for me now. It's got everything I'm currently looking for. We got dead people in a dead ship above a dead planet inside a dead space. Whoa, that's a whole lot of death. As a first-time player, I can see exactly why people say this is a near-perfect horror game. Overall, I'm not into the actual gameplay of most horror games. I think the main reason for this is the feeling of being utterly defenseless. Don't get me wrong, a lot of horror games have excellent stories that you could easily immerse yourself into. But when it comes to not being able to fight back, it can really just spiral into cheap jump scares or a running simulator for hours on end. And for me, this can get old real fast. But unlike most horror games, Dead Space allows you to fight back against these creatures of the night, and not just in one way either, but instead in a variety of ways that I'm gonna go more in depth of later. Overall, I just want to talk about some of the things I really enjoy about this game as a new player to the franchise. Let's start off with the setting and atmosphere of the Ishimura itself. It's a spaceship devoid of human life and replaced with all sorts of monsters. With these long dark metal hallways and vents scattered throughout the ship, it feels as if one of these creatures can pop out of anywhere and anything, especially when the light comes into play. The lighting is just so goddamn good and boosts the atmosphere to another level. This game is dark, and I mean super fucking dark. These beams of flickering lights down the hallways really plays into the eeriness of the game. And sometimes the shadows that the light give off can trick you into thinking there's monsters waiting in the area, when in reality there's nothing there. That's just you being a little bitch. It just goes very well into the overall vibe of the game. To further build on the lighting, you get so used to the darkness throughout the game that when an area or room is bright or well lit, it makes something within you just feel wrong, like something bad is waiting to happen. Cause why is this specific room so bright compared to everything else? I just really like that it's able to convey this type of emotion in places that are supposed to feel safe or comforting, like well-lit rooms, but instead cause a sense of dread. Or maybe that's just me. Let me know in the comments if y'all think that well-lit rooms in Dead Space also give you the same sense of dread that I get. The sound design of this game is something else I thoroughly enjoy. The weight of Isaac's footsteps on metal to emphasize how heavy the suit probably is. The metallic clanking of the ship or pitter-patters of things running around the vents further emphasize the dreadful feeling you have throughout the whole game. There's a moment in the game that I feel really captures what I like about the sound design. As you're walking your way through the ship, you suddenly hear a loud and prominent thumping noise echoing through the metal hallways. Eventually you find the source, and at the end of a hallway is a person methodically banging their own skull against the wall. And when I say skull, I literally mean their own skull. As you approach this person, you realize he has literally no skin around his head. Nothing you can do can stop him from banging, he just continues on. And anytime you're around this area of the ship, you can still hear the thumping of his skull. It's just so eerie knowing that this sound comes from that. Moving on to talk about something a little bit more exciting. The gore, the guts, the blood. Now I had no idea that Dead Space had this much body horror and gore inside of it, and it's just perfect the way it's executed here. I knew before playing the game that the necromorphs themselves were made off of people, but I did not know that every fleshy thing on this ship was also made from humans. It's just plain yucky. Just look at some of the concept artwork of the transformations. Better yet, this scene of somebody being transformed literally right on top of Isaac. It's truly terrifying to see the transformation taking place up close. Another aspect of this gore I enjoy is the peeling system they have in place. Again, another thing I didn't know about before playing. As you shoot the necromorphs, their limbs can obviously get chopped off, but another thing that can indicate their HP is you can literally peel layers off of their skin while shooting them. I didn't fully realize this until I got that one force gun and shot it at one of the necromorphs for the first time. I blew all of the skin off in one shot, and when they got back up walking at me, it was pretty much a skeleton of their former selves. After that happened, this was the only gun I wanted to use for the rest of the game. This is probably the perfect time to talk about the combat itself. The combat in Dead Space is actually very enjoyable. With the peeling system, it makes the combat visually fun, and the dismemberments make it actually feel like you're slowly beating down each necromorph. Another thing about the combat is the variety of ways you're actually able to defend yourself. Not only do you have multiple guns, but you also have 2 abilities. One of these abilities slows everything down when you're in a pinch, and the other is a telekinesis type ability where you can grab and throw most objects, including parts of the monsters. This can come in handy when the monster has some sort of knife hand that you could use against them. The way these monsters actually spawn are pretty cool too. You'll be in the middle of fighting one necromorph, backing up, shooting, then all of a sudden there's one behind you as well. So it really makes you watch your back every time you're in combat, so you can't just simply backpedal through each fight. Now, this is a near perfect game for a reason. In my playthrough, I had plenty of bugs and glitches, and many of these bugs made me miss some scares. For example, in the opening, when you first get chased by the necromorphs to the elevator, one of them kind of just appeared in front of me and sat there, which confused me, until I looked on YouTube and seen what the actual scare was supposed to be. This was very disappointing to miss in real time, especially with it being the opening of the game. There's also other moments where the necromorphs appear invisible for me, but I could still hear them. So again, moments that were supposed to get my blood pumping instead turned into me spamming the melee button, or I'll get random T-poses out of nowhere. When these glitches happen, it threw me completely out of being immersed, but thankfully Dead Space is good enough to get me back in the game quickly. But it's still over a year later and things like this still aren't fixed. Come on now. The last thing I'm gonna touch on are the differences I recently found out about the original and the remake. The main one being that Isaac was a mute character. How the fuck was he mute in the original? I couldn't imagine the remake having Isaac not talking or reacting to the things that he saw. So I'm really glad that they made him actually have a voice in this one. Let me know in the comments if you enjoy him with or without a voice, because from what I see, the community is kind of split on this decision, which I don't really understand, especially if he talks in Dead Space 2. Was there even an explanation to why he didn't talk in the first one? Wrapping up, the Dead Space remake, in my opinion, is amazing, and I think it's the perfect starting point for anybody on the fence about wanting to jump into the franchise, but worried that the story or gameplay might be a bit dated. I can confidently assure you that it's not. It's also inspired me to want to get into more horror games overall. I didn't realize how much I've missed out on over the years just by dismissing most horror games.